Welcome to the Dan Sports Tips Daily Fantasy NFL Preview Show for Week 4 of the NFL. It is game day. This video is a little bit late. I didn't mean to put it up yesterday. Obviously, we're going to be looking at how we can construct a daily fantasy sports lineup on DraftKings of a quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a tight end, a flex play, and a defensive special teams using our $50,000 budget. I will be looking at offensive stacks, defensive stacks, other players at each of the positions. For any of you that haven't had the opportunity to sign up and play daily fantasy sports with DraftKings yet, I will put a link in the description beneath this video that will enable you to do that today. Looking at the offensive stacks, the Denver Broncos, quarterback Trevor Siemian and wide receiver Demaryius Thomas go for 5,400 and 6,700 respectively. The Buccaneers in opposition today are a solid run defence that struggles against the pass. Over the last 16 games, or a full season's worth of data, the Buccaneers have allowed multiple touchdown passes in 13 of 16 games, including to the Los Angeles Rams and Case Keenum last week. Siemian has, bar the last game in Cincinnati, split targets fairly equally between Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, who is also usable, but as Thomas is steadily trending upwards, I do prefer him for the stack, as I suspect he might be lower owned due to the big game and 2 touchdowns for Sanders last week. The training wheels have come off Siemian since the opening game against Carolina. He attempted 35 passes and threw 4 touchdowns against Cincinnati last week. I like him to have a big day against the Buccaneers secondary on the road as well this week. The San Diego Chargers, quarterback Philip Rivers for 6,900 and wide receiver Travis Benjamin for 5,900. It's the New Orleans Saints. A lot of people are going to be on this. It's the sort of automatic play these days in daily fantasy to oppose the Saints. Their defense is still the worst in the NFL. The Falcons were able to shred them on Monday night, even without using Julio Jones. The secondary is a mess. It's devastated by injuries, and it wasn't good when they were healthy. Travis Benjamin is a legit deep threat receiver. He's got lots of speed. He's the clear number 1 in the offense since the injury to Keenan Allen. Antonio Gates should be absent for this game again. It won't be the highest owned stack of the week, I imagine, but it probably will be quite close. Since Keenan Allen went down in week 1, Benjamin has caught 10 of 13 targets for 197 yards and 2 touchdowns. And should feast this week on the Saints secondary. Rivers threw 4 touchdown passes at home against the Jacksonville Jaguars. A repeat performance against the Saints unit would not be a surprise at all, though if they do get close, expect a heavy dose of Melvin Gordon. The other stack, of course, is quarterback Philip Rivers for 6,900, wide receiver Terrell Williams for 4,400, slightly cheaper obviously. Williams has both slowly started to gain the trust of Philip Rivers and has also remained healthy. As such, he's seen his targets increase week by week, receiving 9 looks last week, catching 6 of them for 69. Assuming the Saints move the football, and you would imagine that Breeze, with his experience in San Diego, will be able to do so. He's still got weapons on offense as well. This does look a potential shootout. It's got the highest total on the bad day with the bookmakers. Williams is arguably in play for 100 yards. The only word of warning, if you do plan on using the Williams stack, is that he doesn't appear to have earned the trust in the red zone yet of Philip Rivers. He has just the 1 touchdown so far, and that was a longer one, so he's not getting red zone looks in the offense. Carolina Panthers, quarterback Cam Newton for 7,800 and Greg Olsen, the tight end, for 6,000. Newton always gives you upside with his legs, and while the Falcons' offense has been ticking over nicely, their defense is still subpar beyond Desmond Trufant. Trufant will likely be on Kelvin Benjamin in this matchup, which leaves Greg Olsen, the other favoured target of the MVP, in play to run wild. It's another game that profiles as a shootout. The total is set north of 50 for this game, while Olsen has only a long touchdown reception against San Francisco to his name to get into the end zone this year. He has received double-digit targets in the last game against the Vikings, hauling in 6 of them for 64 yards against one of the better defences against the tight end in all of football. The same cannot be said of Atlanta, and in a divisional game off of a loss, expect the Panthers to be put some points on the board this week on the road against an Atlanta defence that's allowed a league-high tying 10 touchdown passes through 3 games this season. And finally, the chalk stack of the week, quarterback Matthew Stafford for 7,300 and wide receiver Marvin Jones for 7,300. Marvin Jones is apparently the second coming of Calvin Johnson. He practiced in full on Friday, having been limited on Thursday, and thus is expected to play in this game after that unexpected appearance on the injury report. This will be the highest owned stack, I think, this week. Stafford, who normally does struggle with when he faces the blitz, is going to be facing a Bears team that blitzes amongst the least in all of football and is very welcoming to opponents on their home field in recent times. Stafford has thrived since Jim Bob Cooter took over the offensive reins. Turnovers have been cut out in the simplified route tree for the Lions, and they move the football very efficiently. Marvin Jones has averaged 136 yards per game and had an absolute monster last week with 205 on 6 receptions, only 8 targets, and 2 touchdowns. I'm certain against Chicago that this will be a very heavily used stack, but I do also think it is, certainly worth using in at least one lineup. Defensive stacks. Running back David Johnson for 7,800 and the Arizona Cardinals defense for 3,900. It isn't cheap, but the Cardinals come back home with a point to prove. Johnson is a 3-down back. He offers complete production, and the defense does have solid kick returners as well as Case Keenum in opposition at quarterback. The Rams have got a solid run defense, so it will be a tough day sledding for Johnson, but with the passing upside and as a favoured red zone weapon, he does make perfect sense as a stack for a Cardinals team that made a habit of blowing out bad teams last year, and let's not be mistaken, despite having 2 wins on the board this year, the Los Angeles Rams are not good. And finally, running back Christian Michael for $6,000 and the Seahawks defense for 3,800. This is another tough matchup for the running back Christian Michael against a very good New York Jets front, but with Thomas Rawls out for an extended period and a hobbled Russell Wilson with injuries to both of his legs, who else is moving the ball on the ground for Seattle? The Hawks defense should be able to do a solid job against the Jets unit and Six Patrick, who will be down Eric Decker and have a hobbled Brandon Marshall at wide receiver. Michael's gone over 5 yards per carry this year, but the Jets are among the better run defences, allowing just 3.3 yards a carry. The main concern here really is Seattle travelling coast to coast in the early time slot, but I still think it's a worthwhile looking stack. Quarterbacks that can be used this week. Joe Flacco of the Baltimore Ravens for $5,900. After a solid performance last week, people may forget that the Raiders unit that is travelling coast to coast for an early game for the 3rd time in 4 weeks leads the NFL in passing yards allowed per game. Flacco's been unspectacular so far this year, but he does have a cannon for an arm, plenty of threats at receiver, including the home run threat Mike Wallace. After a poor game against Jacksonville last week, many may be put off Flacco in what is an absolute top draw matchup and a decent price range. I think he could potentially be low owned this week. Running backs this week, Melvin Gordon of San Diego for 6,300. Every man, their wife and their dog's going to have Melvin Gordon in their lineup this week, but I think you have to. Gordon gets the Saints defense. Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman ran wild in a nationally televised game on Monday. Obviously, New Orleans are coming in on the short week. Bar newly signed Dexter McCluster, Gordon has no obstacles in his path for running back work, and as such should see a lot of carries in this game, and he does see work in the passing downs as well since Danny Woodhead went down. His yards per carry is fairly pedestrian on the year, just above 3, but the Saints defence is allowing 5 yards a carry and almost 150 rushing yards per game at this early stage of the year. Gordon, as I say, will be the highest owned player today, but I think you've almost got to put him in there, because otherwise I think you're going to be giving your opponents a head start, barring an injury, which you wouldn't put past the Chargers the way their season's gone. Running back DeMarco Murray of the Tennessee Titans for 6,800. Tennessee want to run the football. Malarkey stated that in the pre-season. It's been evidenced in their play to this point in the year. Murray has seen unexpected work in the passing game as well for further upside, and despite the presence of Heisman winner Derrick Henry also on the roster, is very much the lead back in this offense. He's averaging a very healthy 6 yards per carry at this early stage of the year. He profiles quite similarly to LeGarrette Blount, who had a lot of success against the Texans unit that is allowing a surprising 4.8 yards per carry. Murray isn't sexy, he likely won't be highly owned either, but I think he's a very solid play this week. Running back Jordan Howard of the Chicago Bears for 3,700. With all around him injured, the Bears are without Jeremy Langford and probably Kadeem Carey in this game as well. The only obstacle for running back work for rookie Howard in this game is newly signed Joink Bell. Detroit have allowed 5.1 yards per carry on the year, which ties them for the lead in the NFL at this stage, and while there are game flow concerns if the Bears Bears fall behind early in this game, and they may well do so. Howard, who has shown flashes in limited work to this point, should also see some work in the passing game. And running back Isaiah Crowell of Cleveland for 4,400. The numbers are spiked a little by the long run and yardage total against Baltimore Ravens, but Crowell is averaging 91 yards per outing this year, a whopping 6 yards per carry, and now faces a Washington unit that's already allowed 7 rushing touchdowns this year, the most in the league on the season, and a healthy 4.6 yards per carry. The Browns are likely seeing Cody Kessler at quarterback again this week, so their safest option appears to be utilising the running backs, regardless of game flow, to move the football, and Crowell is going to get more work, I think, than Duke Johnson at a very usable price of 4,400. Wide receivers this week, DeSean Jackson of the Washington Redskins for 6,200 against the Cleveland secondary that has suffered injuries, though Joe Hayden may return for this matchup. He's averaged a hair below 8 targets a game, with a high of 10 in week 1 against Pittsburgh. He is a big play threat who stretches the field and has been in the neighbourhood of the 100-yard bonus points twice this year, falling just short with 96 yards against the Giants last week. The Redskins cannot run the ball. They've little option but to air it out, and with Jackson and Jordan Reed being the main beneficiaries. If you're averse to using Jackson and looking for a bit more production certainty, or are scared of Joe Hayden, then wide receiver Jamison Crowder of the Washington Redskins for 4,200 has been off-targeted in the slot this year. He provides more certainty, less upside, so he is arguably best suited to cash game play, but he's found the end zone twice so far this year, catching 4 passes on a low of 7 targets last week against the Giants. The Browns unit isn't at the level of the New York Giants, and there should be more opportunity again this week. I think the targets will probably go up again from 7 against Cleveland. Doug Baldwin of Seattle for 6,100. The New York Jets defense does allow a league-leading 9.7 yards per pass, and if their run defense manages to stop Christian Michael, then Seattle will be forced to move the ball through the air, which is when they was actually seen to better effect at the back end of last season, and Baldwin, the main receiving threat, was the beneficiary then, and he will be again today. He comes in off of a monster game last week, catching 8 of his 10 targets for 164 and a touchdown, and in 2 of the 3 games this year has provided excellent value, clearing 24 total points. He looks in a decent spot again this week on the assumption that the Seattle line can protect Russell Wilson long enough, and or Wilson is mobile enough to buy some time. If they can't, those are 2 very, very valid questions that need to be answered at this stage, and it's whether or not you're willing to take that risk. Wide receiver Mike Wallace of the Baltimore Ravens for 5,200. Wallace is the big play threat against a porous Oakland pass defense, should have the opportunity to hook up with Flacco a few times this week. He's caught at least 50% of his targets, having received 6 targets in each of the first 3 games. He's scored 3 touchdowns this season. He will need to find the end zone to provide value this week, but it's probably worth buying a ticket. And Terrell Pryor of Cleveland for 4,300. With the injury to Corey Coleman, what else do Cleveland have in the passing game? Andrew Hawkins? Pryor had a big week last week, amassing 34.9 points against Miami, filling a variety of roles and garnered a lot of attention. I think there is a strong chance at this price that he could be highly owned, and I'm unsure about consistency as well. So while he could be worth a fade, this Washington pass defense hasn't proven to be good. It's already down Brashard Breeland. However, you wouldn't want to see Josh Norman shadowing Pryor in this game. How about that for a sentence I never thought I'd say? Wide receiver Kevin White of Chicago for 3,400 is the very essence of a lottery ticket. White is raw. He needs to work on his route running, but he did show a few signs on Sunday night, with one catch in particular, of progress. He leads the Chicago Bears in targets this year. Darius Slay will likely be taken up with a hobbled Alshon Jeffrey on the other side of the field. The rest of Detroit's pass defense is not good. With the Bears potentially in catch-up mode as well, there is some scope for White to score some points against the Detroit Lions defense that has allowed 10 passing touchdowns through 3 games this season. Looking at tight ends, Dennis Pitta of Baltimore for 3,400 gets frequent looks from Joe Flacco in the Baltimore passing attack. The Ravens do host the Raiders, who are bad against the pass and have issues with the tight end. Pitta has caught 15 of 20 targets in the last 2 games and looks set to see plenty of the ball this week against the Raiders as well. Hunter Henry of the San Diego Chargers for 2,700. The rookie Henry had a really good game, catching 5 of 5 for 72 yards last week until the fumble at the end of the game as the Chargers were driving in an attempt to get the win. With Antonio Gates likely to miss out again and a quarterback in Rivers who likes to look to the tight end facing a porous Saints defense, this looks a decent decent matchup at a cheap price, as does Zach Miller of the Chicago Bears for 2,700. Miller caught 8 of his season-high 9 targets on Sunday night, mainly in garbage time against the Cowboys, scoring 2 touchdowns. He has the dream matchup against Detroit, who are terrible against the tight end, and he looks an absolute top play at a bargain price against the Lions, as the Bears could well find themselves playing from behind. Even if they aren't, it makes a lot of sense to look for Miller in the red zone, and I think Zach Miller's an outstanding play at the prices as well. For defences this week, the Washington Redskins against the Cleveland Browns, the Redskins unit that has been much maligned to this point of the year look a solid play in spite of being down their number 2 cornerback. They've managed to pressure the quarterback in the last 2 weeks with 6 sacks over the last 2 games. The Browns may be making some moves on the offensive line as well, including at centre, which could increase the chances for sacks in this game. They lack weapons in the passing game. They've got a rookie Kessler, who I don't think's ready as well, but under centre. Even though the passing game's the Achilles heel of this Washington Redskins defensive unit, there is turnover potential here. That is what I've got for you today. Let me know in the comments what you think is going to happen in today's NFL games, who you're going to be using in your lineups. Don't forget to smash the like button. Follow me on Twitter at dansports.tips. Please do subscribe to the channel. I will be here all season long with weekly NFL content. I'll see you later. Best of luck.